Israel claims the Gaza ceasefire has been restored, but the night skies tell another story. Over 100 Palestinians were killed overnight, many of them women and children, in one of the deadliest strikes since the truce began. Hospitals are overwhelmed, morgues full, and families are again forced to dig through the ruins of their homes searching for their children. And across Europe, the outrage that began more than 2 years ago when this war erupted in October 2023 has not faded. In Spain, protests, sit-ins and strikes have become a constant pulse of defiance, a demand for justice and accountability that refuses to be silenced. I'm Pam Morsi, and this is In Focus. Al-Ahram Online reports that Israel declared the Gaza ceasefire restored after a night of deadly airstrikes that killed more than 100 Palestinians. Gaza's civil defense said 35 of the victims were children. Ambulances and pickup trucks crowded hospitals' entrances as doctors struggled without electricity or medicine. Israel's defense minister claimed dozens of Hamas leaders were killed. Yet Gaza's hospitals reported the dead were mostly families sheltering in tents. Since the US-brokered ceasefire took effect on October 9, 2025, over 150 Palestinians have been killed, exposing what aid workers describe as a ceasefire in name only. To help us explore this moment, Gaza's bleeding ceasefire and the enduring fire of solidarity in Europe, we're joined tonight by Alejandra Martinez, a journalist and TV host at Canal Red in Spain, as well as a participant in the Global Sumud Flotilla, which sought to break the Israeli blockade of Gaza. Thank you for joining us there, Alejandra.
Hi, it's a pleasure.
Let's start off by asking you about last night's tragedy. More than 100 Palestinians have been killed under what Israel called a restored ceasefire, despite these violations. How do you interpret this contradiction in the statements, the official statements, and what's actually happening on the ground?
Well, the first thing I have to say is that I think after 70 years of Israeli apartheid and colonialism and 2 years of straight-out genocide, Israel has demonstrated that you cannot trust them to keep their word. And so when they called for a ceasefire, or they said they were going to start a ceasefire, which is the third time or the fourth time this happens during these 2 years of genocide, people that know what Israel is up to or capable to should not trust Israel to hold on to his word. And this time it happened the same as the times before, which is Israel has not respected the ceasefire for one single day. They have kept bombing, they have kept killing Palestinians and exterminating Palestinians, and this hasn't stopped. And now, today, what we see is a new escalation on the genocide. And I think Francesca Albanese, the UN relator for the Palestinian occupied territories, says it really well, which is like normally when a ceasefire happens in Palestine, what happens is the Palestinians cease and the Israelis fire. So this is what is happening. And this only shows that the so-called peace pact or peace agreement with Trump leading this peace deal was only a hoax, and that it was only meant to demobilize and was only meant so people stopped escalating the solidarity with Palestine that was happening, like the international solidarity with Palestine that was happening worldwide. And so it was a strategy.
We'll get to the idea of solidarity, but if we could discuss more the idea of what the Israelis say and what actually happens in reality. As you said, there are a lot of atrocities as well, you know, like the hospitals have been destroyed, children have died and been pulled on from under rubbles, as well as the families that have been completely erased from the civil registry. These are things that have happened and have gone, you know, words cannot even begin to describe the tragedy. From your point of view, what are the people inside Gaza trying to tell the world that still isn't being heard yet?
I think there's still, like, even though Israel has done his best to kill all the journalists, all the Palestinian journalists that are in Gaza, there are still journalists in Gaza. There are still Palestinian people that are speaking their words. And I think, like, what we should do is only listen to what Palestinians say, because they are able still to say it. They are still alive and they are saying it. And I think that what they say is that Israel is committing a genocide and against their people. There's an illegal occupation going on. There's bombings on schools, on well, there's no universities left. There's bombing on the few hospitals that are left, on the refugee camps. And I think this is a planned extermination plan. That's what a genocide is.
Well, if you could tell us a bit about your experience on the Global Samud. You were aboard the Global Samud flotilla earlier this year, confronting Israeli drones and harassment at sea. Could you give us your take about this mission? What motivated you to take this mission on, as well as the messaging that you're trying to deliver to the rest of the world? And what was your experience like at sea, given the dangers that you faced?
Yeah, okay, so what drove me to join this Global Summit Flotilla, I think it was the feeling that people in Europe and in the global north were not doing enough to stop this genocide, and were fed up of our governments being complicit in this genocide and selling arms and buying arms from Israel. And so, since our governments were complicit and were not doing anything to stop this genocide, people organized to do at least something. And I think the most valuable thing that the Global Summit Flotilla did was raise up awareness and raise up international solidarity, but also put on to light what happens when a white person and a person with a European passport goes through a little bit of what a Palestinian goes through. Because what I went through when we were finally abducted in international waters and sent to an Israeli prison for 5 days was just a very small part of what a Palestinian person suffers when they are in an Israeli prison. And that happens daily, and it has happened daily for 70 years. So it was a very beautiful experience of international solidarity. More than 40 countries, more than 500 people from all over the world. And I think it also managed to raise a global wave of solidarity, and it happened in Spain or in Italy, that meant also, like, the solidarity grew, and there was a general strike in Italy, and there was a very big movement in Spain. And I think
other than the solidarity, do you also think that this mission may have pressured the Israelis as well into, I suppose, submitting, or even at least being shunned by the international community for their actions?
I think so. I think the international tide was changing, and I think it was changing to a more pro-Palestinian stance and a more anti-genocide stance. And I think that's also a part of why the peace deal, or this, like, peace deal that Trump made, is because I think it's meant to demobilize people, because this peace deal that has not brought peace and that won't bring peace, because it's not a justice deal, and without justice there will be no peace. This has made the Palestinian genocide to go off most of the news in the global north, and that has also an intention to demobilize and to keep the people of the global north looking away from Gaza and from Palestine so that Israel can keep doing what it's doing, which is a genocide. And it's also a way for Israel to try to gain again this international image of the only democracy in the Middle East, which is false. And um, and I think that's part also of what is happening. And
as you said there, like that the international community as a whole has changed their mindset relatively when it comes to the Israelis. It's very hard for them to get back to how they were viewed, at least in the Western Hemisphere. Given that the blockade as well that in Gaza in the last 2 years has been the longest and most punishing sieges known in modern history, do you think that the international community truly grasps the human and moral costs of maintaining this blockade after many years? And will the international community be able to forget what has happened? I doubt that, given what we've seen in the last 2 years, these things will fade from our memories.
I think the Palestinian genocide is the worst thing we've seen on this on the 21st century. I mean, like, we have never seen a genocide televised like this. And I do think there's people in the global north that grasp what is happening, but still don't care enough for it to stop. That is, I think, the most worrying part, because I do think there's people, especially those in power in the Northern Hemisphere, that know what is happening. Because I think right now, no one can say they don't know. It's impossible. You just need to have a phone to see the destruction, to see the genocide, the bombings, the kids dead under rubble. So I think no one is able anymore to say they didn't know what was happening. And if that I'm a normal citizen in Spain, have access to what is happening, of course my government does, and of course the global leaders do. But I think the worst part is they are not willing to do what they have to do to stop it, which is...
Don't you think that there is a slight shift, even if it is minor, but there is a shift, at least in some of the policies, not necessarily from the United States, but from Europe at least? There's the recognition of a Palestinian statehood, and there's a bit of a shift when it comes to how they view the Israelis as well. Is this not a win for the Palestinian people?
I don't think, like, talking from Spain's point of view, I think Spain is right now globally recognized as a pro-Palestinian state, and I don't think Spain is a pro-Palestinian state. It has had a pro-Palestinian apparent stance. They have recognized on paper a Palestinian state, but they have not done anything to recognize that state actually, because, for example, I was kidnapped in international waters, and my government was telling me that I should not continue on the global summit flotilla because I was going to enter Israeli waters when those waters are Palestinian waters. And if you recognize the Palestinian state, you should recognize the Palestinian waters, but they don't. And they have endorsed an arms embargo in Spain, but when you go down to the paper, it's not an arms embargo at all. The cargoes with arms are still going through the Spanish ports and the Spanish waters. So I think the shift is more dialectical than practical, because there's a big movement in Spain with Solidarity on Palestine that has forced our government at least to appear to do something. But I think it hasn't yet forced them to do actual things for the genocide to stop, because my president went running to recognize the peace deal of Trump and Netanyahu, and he went to Egypt to this shameful event over the Palestinian bodies and over the Palestinian genocide. So I do think the people of the world know what happens, but I do think the governments are complicit, and they are still complicit, and they haven't done anything yet to stop the genocide.
Well, you're saying there that your government has not supported you throughout this journey, but you also said at some point, I will do it again until Palestine is free from the river to the sea. What personal experiences or convictions have driven you to remain committed to this cause despite all the backlash you may have faced, as well as censorship and the personal risk you overtook there?
Well, I think it's the least we can do. I think we haven't done enough. it's the least we can do. All the backlash we are facing, all the things we have faced is just a very, very, very small part of what Palestinians face. And I think it's just like the bare minimum, like Greta Thunberg says, it's the bare minimum we can do as Europeans to try to stand in solidarity with Palestine, because we won't save Palestine. I don't want to be a white savior. I don't want to save Palestine. I just want my government not to be complicit, so Palestinians can liberate themselves and they have the right to decide on what their land and their government should look like.
Well, since you're talking about your government not being complicit in a genocide, protesters across Spain and Europe have demanded, as you've said before, suspensions of arms, as well as the exports of these arms and munitions, as well as breaking diplomatic ties. European Union to translate these popular demands into policy.
I think they are some parties and some political parties, and especially a lot of movements and popular movements that are pushing for those policies to be made. But at least for what I can see, von der Leyen in the European Union, and basically all of the states in the European Union are still complicit and are still comfortable on being complicit with this genocide. But those are the governments, the people are not. So I think what we have to do is to keep organizing the solidarity movement with Palestine and to keep mobilizing, to force our governments to do what they do not want to do, which is the arms embargo, it's the cutting of ties with Israel, all ties. It's Israel out of Eurovision and out of the sport activities and organizations in Spain, in Europe. So all of that has to happen. And of course, we need to stop funding Israel, and we need to stop funding Israeli-based companies and companies that operate in occupied territories in Palestine, such as Booking or Airbnb or Coca-Cola or Carrefour. And we do need to do all of this.
So you would be in support of BDS movements in general and organize for it in Europe?
Yes, of course. I think BDS is one of the things as individuals can do, and I think it's useful. I think it showed it was useful with the South African apartheid state, and I think it's of course something we need to do. I don't think it's enough. I think we need to do a lot more than just BDS. But I think BDS is the bare minimum we can do. So of course I support it.
But as you said, Spain is one of the most, outspoken countries in Europe that supports the Palestinian cause in general. So you're relatively lucky when it comes to the ability to protest for the Palestinians. But there are other citizens of Europe that have faced numerous issues, such as, pro-Palestine groups in the UK where they've been proscribed. How do you think that they can force a change in governments that are more rigid, like the UK?
Well, the first thing I have to say is that what's happening in the UK and Germany is terrible. I think it's close to fascism. Locking up people for protesting a genocide is the least democratic thing a government can do. But I also have to say this also happens in Spain. In Spain, we've had detentions in the mobilizations, in the last mobilizations, the ones that stopped, for example, the last sport activity that was the cyclist turn to Spain that was stopped because there was an Israeli team participating, and so the people stopped it, and there were a lot of detentions. There was a general strike a couple of weeks ago, and there was also more than 20 and 25 arrested people in Spain. There's people facing terrorism charges in Spain for being for being in the movement with solidarity of Palestine. This has been happening for a long time. So I think it's worse in Germany and it's worse in the UK. And I think it's worse because both Germany and the UK have such a big part and are so complicit in the genocide, that they have to use more repression in their states in order to keep the solidarity movement down. But this also happens in Spain, even though they say it's a state that stands in solidarity with Palestine. We have a president that says that he looks forward and that he admires the protesters, that the pro-Palestine protesters that take to the streets. But then that same president is the one that sends the police and arrests them. So this is hypocrisy, and I think it just shows how even the most pro-Palestinian European countries are also complicit in genocide.
Well, let's talk about the independent outlets like Canal Red. They've given Palestine extensive human-focused coverage, unlike the mainstream or legacy media we've seen in Europe and obviously the Western Hemisphere in general. How significant is it that alternative media exists in the ecosystem to sort of reshape public understanding and counter the propaganda about the Palestinians?
I think this is one of the most important things that journalists have to do right now. I mean, I think journalists and alternative media right now are the only ones that are still covering Palestine, because from the moment that the peace deal was signed by Trump and Netanyahu, the Palestine disappeared from the big media outlets. So what we have to do, and I think we have to do it not only because Palestine is right now something that any journalist can know that they have to report on, but also in solidarity with the more than 250 journalists that have been assassinated by Israel in Gaza in the last 2 years. I think this is very important, because Israel, the Hasbara, has so much money and pushes so much money, not only in traditional media, but also in social networks and in Instagram and in X, in order to push their propaganda, that the least we can do is to try to fight against them.
But the question here would be, is how can these grassroots media outlets that are more alternative counter legacy media with all their money and all their funding?
I think what they have to do is tell the truth, and I think, well, there's always a question about us being the little guys and the big media and the big funders and the big money being in the other side. This has always been like this for the people, the common people and the people that stand against injustice. But I think the place where we are right now brings also new opportunities for this media. We have ways to get ourselves heard. I think there's also, like what I was saying before, there's people in Gaza that are reporting from Gaza, and that has been it's possible because there's social networks and there's different media that are able to report, and this didn't happen before because there was no media or means for it to do it. So I think what we have to do is tell the truth. We have to give voice to Palestinians, and we have to combat the Israeli lies. We have to show the lies, and we have to...
But there is a consolidation as well when it comes to the social media outlets. Now we're seeing big businessmen buying into certain social medias, like in the US when it comes to TikTok and so forth. How do you think this can affect grassroots journalism? Is it going to somehow shadow them or shadow ban them, I suppose, when it comes to dealing with it?
Yes, of course, that's what we have to face. But this has been always the case. And I think even though it is going to be difficult, people have always found a way. And of course, they will look forward to censor us, and they will try to bring money in so they can shut us down. But that's what we cannot make. Like, we should not. We cannot stop. We have to keep going, even though they have the power, they have the money, but we have the people, and I think that's the important part.
Can we talk a bit about the generational divide in Europe? Now, we've seen younger people leading solidarity actions towards the Palestinians, while the older political elite remain cautious when it comes to Palestinians. Why do you think that the youth activism has become the backbone of the global movement for Palestinians?
I think what I think that has happened is that Palestine has, at least in the global north, has remembered us of a lot of things that people in the global north had forgotten, and that is such as that mobilizing and organizing is useful for change, to make our governments do what they do not want to do. And I also think there was a youth that was I don't know how to say that they were demobilized because of a lot of things, because of the state of the world, and Palestine has remembered them that organizing is important. And I also think Palestine has a very important thing in the global north also, which is that it mobilizes as political actors, and it organizes the migrant youth from the migrant countries that are, I don't know, from the Middle East and from the north of Africa and from Africa, that normally are very marginalized in our countries, but that are politically active and subjects of the political action in the Palestinian movement. And that has also helped to make solidarity bonds between different groups that were marginalized before. Yes. And that is also very important, because given the rise of fascism in Europe, that brings a very specific type of Islamophobia, this fight against marginalization and this political organization of the migrant youth is very important also.
Well, since you're talking about the rise of fascism and authoritarian rule, one of your fellow Global Samud Flotilla members, Greg Stoker, always talks about the idea of what happens in Palestine eventually translates back home, referring to the United States. Do you think this is a true statement, that the tactics being used in the Palestinian territories may well translate into the Western Hemisphere?
Of course, but this is not something that will happen in the future. This is something that is really happening right now. Our governments buy the police staff from Israel. The arms we buy are tested in Palestinian bodies and in the genocide. This is happening right now. The software our governments use to spy on organized people, like such as Pegasus, they are also Israeli. So I don't think this is something that is going to happen in the far future. It's something that is already happening right now. It happens in the UK when they ban Palestinian solidarity groups like Palestine Action, and they call them terrorists. This is also the strategy in Israel. And yes, I do think what happens in Palestine is not very far from what can happen here. And I think also another thing that makes Palestine the cause of humanity right now is that you can see the facade of normality of this system brought down, and what is underneath that facade of democracy and normality is just exploitation and is just authoritarianism and fascism. But that's what's coming. And of course, I think the normalization of genocide can bring also the normalization of genocide and of authoritarian rule in Europe and in the States.
Well, finally, Alejandra, if we can talk about what we've witnessed in Gaza and the pain there, as well as Europe's resilience, what gives you hope, and what message would you send tonight to those around the world who have started to feel numb when it comes to the carnage we've seen in Gaza?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I think the resilience and resistance of the Palestinian people is an example for people all over the world organizing and resisting injustice. I think we can all learn a lot of the resilience of the Palestinian people that have been enduring an apartheid system and a colonial state for more than 70 years, and they are still there and they're still fighting back. So I think that is very inspiring for the people all over the world. And in the second place, when I was in prison in Israel, in the Ketziat prison, I saw inscriptions of Palestinian people that were locked down there, and the inscriptions talked about that resistance and the not giving up, even though they were enduring tortures and they were enduring being locked up for a long time. There were inscriptions of people that had been locked up for more than 30 years, and they were still fighting, and they were still encouraging other people to fight. And I think what Israel doesn't realize is that Palestinians will never give up, and that is what will eventually make Israel fall, because Palestinians will not give up. And I think that is very, very inspiring for the people of the world.
Thank you so much, Alejandra Martinez, a journalist and activist from Canal Red and a member of the Global Qnews Flotilla, for joining us here with your steadfast voice. From the rubble of Gaza to the squares of Madrid, excuse me, the struggles for justice continue, relentless, defiant and global. 2 years on, the world may still debate ceasefires, but the people of consciousness have already chosen their side. I'm Morsi, and you've been watching In Focus.